So you looked over the options for this week's Incarnon adapter picks, and you saw that the Torid was up for grabs, and you're wondering, is this a good pick? Should I be picking the Incarnon Torid as my one of my weeklies? So I'm going to show off exactly what this weapon can do in its new form. And I'm saying new form because the Torid completely changes into a different weapon once you turn it into its Incarnon mode. The normal Torid is a launcher. It's a grenade launcher type weapon that fires off these little blobs of infested whatever that land on the ground and create a cloud of gas. And enemies who step in the cloud of gas take a damage over time effect. The Torid is not a particularly popular weapon. Most people don't really use it or haven't used it until now. The grenades fly through the air very slowly. The damage is okay, but nothing to write home about. Small magazine size, and it's just outclassed by most other weapons. However, when you turn it into its Incarnon form, it instead becomes a beam weapon. And it's a beam weapon that chains between multiple targets. It functions somewhat similarly to the Tenno Cycron, or probably closer to the primary version of the Vermisplicer kit gun. If you hit an enemy with a beam, it'll then spread to an additional couple of targets, 6 targets at the maximum, with pretty ridiculous damage numbers. It also has the benefit compared to other Incarnon weapons that you do not actually need to land headshots to fill the Incarnon bar. It is quite enough to just hit enemies directly with the weapon instead of the gas clouds to fill your meter. You're gonna be able to fill your meter very quickly, so you're gonna spend most of the mission in the Incarnon form. What is worth noting though is that the Incarnon form does come with additional benefits in that it simply has increased stats, increased damage, increased multi-shot, increased magazine capacity, increased projectile flight speed, increased crit chance, increased status chance, and these go for both modes of the weapon, so even the normal version of the weapon, the grenade launcher, is going to be significantly improved compared to what it used to in just raw damage numbers. But the beam mode is clearly superior and what you're probably going to be going for when you use it in practice. As for how the weapon should be evolved, it's pretty straightforward. The first evolution is just the Incarnon form itself. The second evolution, you have 2 picks. You can either increase damage by 51 and add +3 multi-shot on the last shot in the magazine, or increase damage by 31, but improve multi-shot by making multi-shot do more damage, but also expend more ammo. Now the problem here is expending more ammo means that you're going to be draining your Incarnon mode faster, so you're going to switch between normal mode and Incarnon mode more often. I don't recommend this, especially since the other upgrade gives a higher increase to the base damage, 51 versus 31. Now, the added benefit here of additional multi-shot on the last shot in the magazine, it's purely for the normal form of the weapon, and you're pretty much never going to see this because you're not going to need an entire magazine to actually switch to Incarnon mode. This would be if you are not switching to Incarnon mode and using the grenade launcher, then the final shot in the magazine is going to have a bit more multi-shot, but it's not going to be particularly noticeable. We're picking this one simply because it increases the raw damage numbers more than the other one, and it does not come with the drawback of draining your magazine faster. Third evolution, you have a bit more flexibility. Increased magazine capacity is nice if you're staying in the normal form. Your magazine is going to go from 5 shots to 14 before you have to reload. Obviously, if you're going with the more multi-shot on the last shot in the magazine, then maybe you don't want increased magazine size if you want to take advantage of that additional multi-shot more often. The middle one, Renewed Horror, when we're talking about the lingering damage field, we're talking about the gas clouds that are left from the normal version of the gun. Here the duration will double on the first shot. It's okay, but you only get it if you reload from empty. And then finally, you have the increased projectile speed. I'm gonna recommend this one simply because when you shoot the grenades to charge the Incarnon form, they're very slow, they have a very slow arc, and just increasing the projectile speed is going to make it easier to land hits directly on enemies. It's going to make it easier for you to build your Incarnon meter. And for the final evolution, you get to pick between either a lot of crit chance, a lot of status chance, or a bit of crit chance and a bit of status chance. Now, the middle one gives the total amount of numbers is the highest. However, the Torid already has a pretty decent base status chance, especially in the Incarnon mode, so ramping up crit chance feels like the correct choice. You can build it for very, very solid crits, which increases the damage numbers a lot. Makes it more relevant for enemies like, for example, Acolytes, who typically you can't load up on too many status procs anyway. And since this weapon fires innate toxin damage, it means that it's going to be pretty hard to build for several combinations of elements at the same time. You're typically going to use one elemental mod, combine it with either cold to create viral damage, or electricity to create corrosive damage, or even heat for gas damage. But all of these status effects are capped at a certain amount of procs, so even if you have a lot of status chance, it's not really going to help you all that much, because you're going to hit the cap on how many status procs you can put on an enemy, and then you're not going to get an additional benefit from that. So you're going to see a bigger increase in your raw damage numbers if you focus on crit chance. As for how you build the weapon itself, you're probably going to need to put quite a lot of forma in this one, because there are a couple of different ways you can go about it, but you're going to need a lot of mod capacity. Primary Merciless feels okay for the Arcane, simply because you're racking up kills very quickly. You're going to be able to keep yourself at max stack at all times. Galvanized Aptitude does not work for the normal version of the weapon, which is a radial attack, but it will work for the beam version of the weapon when it's in the Incarnon form, and it's going to increase your damage by a pretty stupid amount. Since we picked the increase in crit chance, we're going to throw in Hunter Munitions in there. We're going to ramp up crit chance even more with critical delay and vital sense for more crit damage. So we're going to do really stupid crit numbers. Since it has innate toxin damage, it feels very nice to throw in primed cryo rounds here. This weapon only does toxin damage and no other type, so you don't have to worry about weighting the weapon toward a certain element or not. You're just gonna max out on this viral number to the highest extent possible, so primed cryo rounds goes right in there. Since I am using critical delay to really max out the crit chance, this mod has a decrease in your fire rate, so I threw in primed shred to offset that by increasing fire rate. Note though that the punch through is not particularly relevant either for the grenades or for the beam, since the beam chains to enemies anyway. So you don't need to put primed shred in here. There are other options for increasing fire rate that are going to work just as well. You can just use speed trigger, that's even going to give you a bit of an increase in fire rate that's higher than primed shred, and of course vile acceleration, which is a massive increase in fire rate but at a cost of a bit of your damage. It is going to drain your Incarnon mode a bit faster if you put too much into fire rate, but that's probably not going to be a big issue for you. And since we're not building for multiple elements like you would with most other weapons, the combination of either heat and viral or heat and corrosive, that means we pretty much have an open mod slot that we can just chuck in whatever. If you do want to use the normal version of the weapon and not the beam, then you should chuck in primed firestorm to increase the blast radius of the grenades. You can also put in a primed Bane mod if you want to here, depending on what faction you're fighting against. There's even an argument for galvanized scope, because you're already critting pretty hard. Beam weapon, it's pretty easy to land headshots with this thing when you aim, so you're gonna get them red crits, which are fun. Or if you're lazy like me, you can simply increase the base damage of the weapon a bit more. You are going to see the diminishing returns with primary merciless plus serration that you're maybe not going to be as maxed out. But on the other hand, it's just a nice bump to the overall damage of the weapon. If you're not running super high level endgame content with enemies into the thousands, you're not going to see like any scenario where it's wrong to just increase the base damage. If you are running endgame stuff, then the diminishing returns will, be relevant, in which case something like a Bane mod is probably gonna help you a lot more. This is also a perfect slot to just chuck in a Riven, if you happen to have a Riven for the Torid, in which case you could ramp up the crit chance to even stupider numbers, crit damage, multi-shot. These are exactly the sort of things you want with this thing. It's got a very high Riven disposition, like most of these Incarnon weapons, so if you do have a Riven mod for it, it is going to increase the output of damage to even crazier amounts. But that's it. It's pretty straightforward what you're gonna do with this weapon. You take a pretty mediocre grenade launcher and you turn it into one of the strongest beam weapons in the entire game. It is a beam weapon that chains between enemies. We have seen a couple of weapons before that can do that, the Amprex, the Kuvanukor, the Tenno, and these weapons typically rank among the stronger weapons in the game. The Torid is no exception. So yes, the Incarnon Torid is a very, very strong upgrade to this weapon. You're probably gonna love it. If you pick it, you're absolutely not going to regret it. This weapon is a complete powerhouse now. Just go hunt for it. It's a fantastic choice, and you're gonna have a lot of fun. So thank you for listening to this guide. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this content, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. And I will see you guys again tomorrow for something completely different.